Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon, The Book of Carol, Season 2, Episode 2, entitled Moulin Rouge. And I have to say, what a difference a week makes. This episode was leaps and bounds better than the premiere. This episode was so good. I'm so excited to talk to you about it. A lot of stuff happened. Carol and Ash arrive in France with a lot of pretty big hiccups along the way. We learn more about Laurent, what his actual deal is, and Daryl has his first on-screen kiss. After 14 years of gracing our screen, we finally see it. So much to digest in this one. This week, I'll flip things around, so we'll talk about Ash and Carol, and then after we'll talk about Daryl and Isabel and Laurent and everything going on over there. I am no aviation expert, but I would tend to think that a fuel leak in a plane is a pretty big deal, almost a catastrophic deal. But no, it's okay. Ash is going to fix it. They've landed in Greenland. And when Carol gets out of the plane, we see Chekhov's flare gun. When I saw that, they pointed it out twice, and it was so conspicuous. So I said, okay, I know this gun is coming into play later on. Carol gets herself in trouble with a couple of grass walkers, but two strangers come and save the day, and things are looking positive, at least for now. These two women are living in an isolated part of the country, a country that already started off with so few inhabitants. So see these two strangers come along, and one happens to be a very good-looking man. Must have felt like Christmas morning to them, but we can tell that they've been isolated for too long because their social skills need some work. Everyone, word of advice, do not ask somebody to procreate with you an hour after meeting them. I always get nervous when our people separate from each other, and especially when they go off with new people because it's very hard to trust people in the apocalypse. And of course, things don't go well. We see Ian proposition Ash. She asked him to help her repopulate the world, and he's very much taken aback by this. And in the cabin, we see Hannah and Carol. They seem to have a good rapport at first, but we know that Hannah has been tasked with killing her. And Carol plays it cool, and eventually Ian comes in because Hannah can't do it. And then Ian's ready to shoot, but Hannah stops her, shoots Ian in the head with a crossbow. Ian is dead. And I get the impression that Ian was the more domineering. She kind of bossed Hannah around, and now Hannah's very happy to be free of her. And so she asked Carol, like, oh, can I come with you guys to Paris? I can use my French skills from high school. And so we see Carol going along with it for now because Carol knows how to play the game. But then Chekhov's flare gun rears its head. Ash shoots her, and she dies. And this is only the second time I can remember seeing a flare gun being used. We saw Rick use it on a walker once in season 5, but I think this is the first time we've seen it on a human. So anyway, it's revealed that Ash has never killed anybody. How has he gone this far without killing anybody? But anyway, Ash is a good guy. They take off and they make it to France. And so when they make it to France, Carol basically kind of dumps him in a way. And at first I was kind of offended for him because, look at this guy who has gone through all this trouble to get you over here in Europe, and now you're like, oh, stay here. But in hindsight, it does make sense because obviously somebody needs to be there to watch the plane, and also he could have gotten himself into some real mess that Carol found herself in, and that wouldn't have been good. When Carol gets in the city, she sees a military man rounding up people, and she creates a rice trail, a breadcrumb trail, to figure out where they are, and then she ends up in one of Madame Genet's compounds. And we see that these people, they're terrible people. They're using people's basic needs, these desperate people who are looking for food, to get them to come to their side to be part of their militia. And so we see that they ask for 20 volunteers, and Carol gets a bit hemmed up in it. She tries to, overtake things, but they catch her. And the one woman points out that she looks like she has guts. And so she's rounded up and she's put in the paddy wagon, and they're off to the compound with Madame Genet. And so Carol meets a man named Remy who's there with his husband. And his husband's actually in a different car. And we see that car makes a turn and goes somewhere else. And so that same lieutenant lady, she says to Madame Genet, oh, we have 19 volunteers when they asked for 20 originally. So I get the impression that man who is sick, I think he has lung problems, he's probably going to be tested on. We see Madame Janae. She is interrogating and she's torturing Caudron because she wants to know where Daryl, the child, and Isabelle are. And we see a little pendant with Mont Saint Michel on it, so perhaps she'll figure out that's where he is. Going to Daryl's story, Falou and Emile have been rescued, so that's a good thing, so we think. Daryl has brought back a baseball, and he and Laurent are just having a bonding moment playing some baseball. And like I mentioned before, there's something about Laurent that I just find so endearing because I usually do not like children in this show or in most shows, quite frankly. And I think the reason why is because he doesn't exhibit these two characteristics that we see a lot in kids in this universe. He is not rude. He doesn't backchat. And also, he isn't precocious. Like, he is just a kid. And I think that makes sense because he lives such a coddled life. And so he doesn't really know anything different. So, yeah. So it's very nice they're having their moment playing, and then Isabelle joins them. We see throughout this that Laurent is being treated like a little prince, right? So he gets a very fancy breakfast. He has his philosophy studying time. And Daryl and Isabelle talk, and he's like, do you believe this stuff? And she says she still does, but he says, the offer to come back to North America is still there, but she believes in this mission, at least for now. The next morning, Isabelle goes to Laurent's room, and he's no longer there, and it appears as though he's been kidnapped because we see a grappling hook in the window, and everyone's freaking out. Daryl is there, and we see Daryl's arms for the first time in what feels like a long time. And I must say, I am loving Daryl's more European style of wardrobe now that he's on this series, and he's looking good again. Of course, Daryl, Isabelle, and Falou go out to find Laurent, and Emile goes as well. And when we saw him initially, he looked very dejected. He looked very sad, very disturbed. So something was clearly up with him. But he goes along with them too. So it turns out that this was all a master plan to get Daryl out of the space so that they can continue with the ceremony they had planned the next day. And one of them is Emile, and it turns out he has been traumatized by watching the torture of these test subjects, and he wants the ceremony with Laurent to happen because he's bought into the zealotry of it all. And so he's about to kill Lo Sang. Lo Sang is basically like his dad. And Isabelle and Daryl try to level with him, or they pretend like they're leveling with him. And with the swiftness, Isabelle's like, you're going to try to do something to my nephew? She kills him because she's a good aunt. And one thing I would say is, even before then, Isabelle dispatches of somebody else. And what I like about her is that when she does killing or, gruesome things, you can tell that she's thought about it, and she acts with swiftness that doesn't appear hasty, if that makes any sense. It probably doesn't, but I just like the way she operates is what I'm saying. Daryl, Isabelle, and Falou make their way back to Mont Saint Michel, but they have to wait to get in because of the tide. And so now it's just Isabelle and Daryl, and Isabelle says, you know what? Yeah, I'll go back with you to the US. And then a moment that I feel has been brewing for quite a while finally happened. Daryl and Isabelle kiss. And this is the first on-screen kiss that we have seen Daryl have in the entire 14 years he's been on our TV screens, which is wild because Daryl was a heartthrob to many Gen X ladies, a lot of older millennial ladies for the longest time, and now we finally see it. To be honest, I was always a Daryl and Connie shipper because they had such a cute chemistry, but because of everything going on in the story and because of Lauren Ridloff's schedule, that never happened. And so, yeah, even though that didn't get to happen, I do really like Isabelle, and I like them together, so I ship them. So I am now team Daryl Bell. It's awkward, but it works. I forgot to mention this, but earlier on, Sylvie noticed that the chef was making the same fancy meal that she made for Laurent earlier on. And so she follows her, and it turns out Laurent, he wasn't kidnapped. He's over there, and Lo Sang is watching him. Anyway, later on, Lo Sang and Jacinta, the lady in the office, I guess you can call it, they talk, and she says, Daryl's not going to come back. And Lo Sang didn't actually know that. And she says, we need to get this going. We need to do the ceremony, and he would just get in the way. And so even though Lo Sang is kind of upset, he is so much of a zealot that he doesn't want anything to get in the way of it. So he's ultimately okay with Daryl being offed. So he thinks Daryl is very much alive, and he'll definitely come to save Laurent. Anyway, the ceremony is happening tomorrow. So presumably next episode. And so I'm very excited to see what happens there, because honestly, this was an amazing episode of the Daryl Dixon Show. And honestly, it might be recency talking, but I think this might be one of the best episodes of the entire franchise. I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. This is good writing. There's still some things that are a little unbelievable, but it was fun. It made sense. It felt more grounded. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed this episode. And I would love to know if you feel the same way I do. Please leave a comment in the comments area. Let's start a discussion. And yeah, I'll see you next week for next week's episode. Like, share, subscribe, and later, Gators, see you later on I See Melanie. Okay, bye.